A hush fell over the packed courtroom as security guards struggled to contain the overflow of spectators, all straining to catch a glimpse of Marcus Chen, the tech billionaire who stood in his tailored Italian suit before Judge Harrison, while camera flashes illuminated the tears streaming down his face as he pointed to a small figure in the gallery. The tension in courtroom 714 was so thick it seemed to pulse with each breath taken by the hundreds of onlookers who had been lining up since dawn to witness what the media had dubbed the case that changed Silicon Valley. The morning sun streaming through tall Victorian windows cast long shadows across the ornate wooden panels as Judge Harrison adjusted her wide-rimmed glasses, studying the scene before her with eyes that had seen 30 years' worth of cases, but never one quite like this. Marcus Chen cut an imposing figure despite his emotional state, his 6'2" frame wrapped in a suit that cost more than most people earned in a month, yet today, his usual commanding presence seemed somehow dimmed by the weight of what he was about to reveal, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the witness stand, his knuckles white against the polished oak. The gallery behind him was filled with a mix of social elite and homeless advocates, an unprecedented gathering that saw Gucci handbags brushing against tattered backpacks, while reporters scribbled frantically in notebooks, their pens scratching against paper, providing the only sound in the otherwise silent room. Even the usual whispers of legal aides and clerks had fallen quiet as Chen cleared his throat to begin his testimony. In the front row sat Sarah Chen, his wife of 20 years, her perfectly manicured hands clasped tightly in her lap, her designer dress a stark contrast to the simple court attire worn by the social workers and homeless shelter staff who surrounded her on either side, her eyes never leaving her husband as he prepared to tell a story that would shatter the carefully constructed world of Silicon Valley's most powerful players. But it was the small figure that captured everyone's attention. Tommy Walker sat in the middle of the gallery, his newly cut hair and borrowed suit making him almost unrecognizable from the street child who had changed everything 3 months ago, his thin frame straight and proud, despite the crushing pressure of hundreds of eyes fixed upon him as Chen began to speak, his young face showing a wisdom far beyond his 12 years. Judge Harrison leaned forward slightly, her weathered face a mask of professional neutrality, though those who knew her well could detect the slight softening around her eyes as she observed the unlikely pair whose paths had crossed on that fateful December morning. Her gavel lay silent but ready on its wooden block, a symbol of the justice that was about to unfold in ways no one could have predicted. The air conditioning hummed softly overhead, pushing cool air through vents that seemed to whisper with the collective breath of anticipation held by everyone present, from the bailiff standing guard at the heavy wooden doors to the sketch artist whose pencil hovered above paper ready to capture this historic moment for tomorrow's newspapers. At the defense table sat James Morton, owner of Le Maison d'Or and 30 other exclusive restaurants across the city, his expensive suit now wrinkled from weeks in custody, his usually confident smirk replaced by a pallor that spoke of sleepless nights and mounting dread as he watched his empire crumble before him. His team of lawyers shuffled papers nervously, their usual strategies useless against the truth that was about to be revealed. The court recorder sat ready, her fingers poised above her stenotype machine, while lines of code scrolled silently across Chen's smartwatch displaying real-time data from his tech empire. Even here in this traditional courtroom, the modern world pushed its way in, a fitting backdrop for a story that would bridge the gap between Silicon Valley's billions and the forgotten souls who lived in its shadows. Through the tall windows, the San Francisco fog rolled past in waves, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the proceedings, as if nature itself was settling in to witness the unfolding of a story that had begun with a simple warning about a sandwich and would end by exposing a truth that would shake the foundations of an entire city. The story that brought them here began on a bitter December morning when Chen had been about to bite into a $100 truffle sandwich outside Le Maison Dorée, the city's most exclusive restaurant, until a ragged boy with eyes like burning coals launched himself through the crowd, screaming for him to stop, his desperate voice cutting through the winter air like a knife. The memory of that morning played across Chen's mind with crystal clarity as he testified the temperature had been a brutal 32 degrees and steam had risen from the heated sidewalks, while the Maison Dorés staff had installed warming elements to keep their wealthy patrons comfortable while they waited for their $1,000 lunch reservations. He remembered checking his stocks on his phone, while the maître personally delivered his usual order wrapped in gold-flecked paper. Tommy had been watching from his hidden spot behind a stack of empty wine crates, his thin jacket pulled tight against the cold, his breath creating small clouds in the freezing air as he counted the minutes until the restaurant would throw out their daily waste, his stomach cramping with hunger as the smell of truffles and freshly baked bread wafted through the alley vents that pumped hot air and kitchen scents into the winter morning. The security cameras had captured the moment in perfect detail footage that now played silently on screens throughout the courtroom, showing Tommy bursting from his hiding spot, his worn sneakers sliding on the icy pavement as he dodged between startled businessmen and socialites who recoiled from his desperate approach, their faces masks of disgust and alarm as the small figure barreled toward one of the city's most powerful men. Chen remembered dropping his phone in shock. As Tommy grabbed his wrist, the boy's fingers like ice against his skin, the contrast between them stark and immediate. Here was a child who had clearly not eaten in days, trying to stop him from eating food that cost more than most families spent on groceries in a week. The absurdity of it had struck Chen even in that chaotic moment, making him pause just long enough to really look at the boy who had dared to interrupt his lunch. The crowd that had gathered that morning now sat in the gallery, their designer clothes and carefully curated appearances unchanged, but their expressions wholly different as they watched the security footage, many of them hanging their heads in shame as they remembered how they'd called for security to remove the dirty street urchin who had dared to disturb their peaceful lunch hour. Tommy had spoken with a wisdom beyond his years that morning, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much, lived too hard, and understood too deeply the darkness that lurked behind the glittering facade of the city's most celebrated dining establishment, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush as he tried to warn Chen about what he had witnessed through those steamy kitchen windows. The restaurant staff had emerged from the building, their pristine white uniforms and arrogant expressions captured forever by the security cameras as they moved to intercept Tommy, their practiced smiles hiding the panic in their eyes as the boy continued to shout about expired meat and recycled bread, their attempts to dismiss him as mentally ill or seeking attention growing more desperate with each passing second. Jen described how something in Tommy's eyes had stopped him from simply walking away, the raw honesty, the fierce determination, the unmistakable look of someone who had nothing left to lose but refused to stay silent in the face of wrongdoing. It was a look Chen recognized from his own reflection decades ago, when he had been a struggling immigrant student coding in his garage dreaming of changing the world. The winter wind had whipped around them that morning, carrying the sound of expensive cars and privileged conversations, the stark contrast between Tommy's worn clothes and the luxurious surroundings serving as a physical reminder of the vast divide between the city's wealthy elite and those who struggled to survive in its shadows, a divide that Chen had contributed to building but now stood ready to help tear down. In the courtroom, Tommy shifted slightly in his seat at the memory, his new clothes still stiff and unfamiliar, but his eyes remained unchanged, still burning with the same intensity that had caught Chen's attention that cold December morning, still carrying the weight of truth that would ultimately bring one of the city's most powerful restaurant empires crashing down around its corrupt foundations. Tommy Walker was no ordinary street kid. During his 6 months of sleeping behind dumpsters, he had created an entire journal documenting the restaurant's dark secrets, watching through steamy kitchen windows as chiefs mixed rotting meat with fresh ingredients and recycled moldy bread into premium sandwiches, his small hands shaking as he sketched times, dates, and names in a tattered notebook he had found. The prosecuting attorney, Enz Reynolds, gently placed the evidence bag containing Tommy's journal on the display table, its pages now carefully preserved by forensics teams who had documented every crayon, marking pencil sketch and water-stained entry that the boy had made during his months of silent observation, the crude, childish handwriting telling a story more damning than any professional investigation could have uncovered. Living on the streets had taught Tommy to be invisible, a skill he had perfected while watching the restaurant's nighttime operations. He would curl up in cardboard boxes positioned near the kitchen vents, where the warm air would keep him from freezing in the bitter winter nights, his small frame allowing him to squeeze into spaces adults would never notice, while his keen eyes recorded every detail of the criminal enterprise unfolding before him. In the courtroom, Tommy described his system for tracking the restaurant's deliveries, explaining how he noticed that the expensive seafood truck would arrive at noon for show unloading empty boxes, while the real deliveries came at midnight from unmarked vans whose drivers never wore uniforms, his testimony painting a picture of elaborate deception that had fooled health inspectors and food critics alike. The boy had developed his own code using symbols and drawings to record what he saw, since reading and writing had been challenging for him, but his photographic memory captured everything: the faces of kitchen staff who looked away when spoiled ingredients were mixed with fresh ones, the exact times when managers would switch labels on expired products, and even conversations he overheard through ventilation shafts about profits and cutting corners. His small notebook contained detailed maps of the kitchen layout drawn from memory, showing where the regular ingredients were stored in front for inspections, while hidden panels in the walk-in freezer concealed the expired products. He had even documented the sounds of late-night food processors mixing old bread into breadcrumbs and spotted prawns being washed with bleach to disguise their age. During his testimony, Tommy revealed how he had learned about food safety standards by reading discarded restaurant industry magazines and health department notices found in the recycling bins, his determination to understand what he was witnessing driving him to improve his reading skills using whatever materials he could find, his knowledge growing alongside his mounting horror at what he observed. The journal entries took a darker turn as Tommy documented his own bouts of illness after eating discarded food, and his observations of other homeless individuals who had become violently sick after consuming the restaurant's waste. His crude drawings, showing calendar days marked with sad faces to indicate when he had seen ambulances picking up people from nearby alleys, while restaurant staff turned a blind eye. In the gallery, several health department officials shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Tommy described how he had tried to report what he had seen only to be dismissed as a nuisance, his small voice growing stronger as he recounted how each rejection had only made him more determined to gather evidence that no one could ignore, his persistence finally paying off when he spotted Marcus Chen about to consume one of the contaminated sandwiches. The most damning pages of Tommy's journal showed calculations of the restaurant's profits performed in wobbly arithmetic, revealing how a child living on the streets had managed to understand the financial motivation behind the criminal enterprise, his basic map showing the thousands of dollars saved each day by recycling expired ingredients while charging premium prices to unsuspecting customers. As Tommy spoke about his discoveries, his new suit couldn't quite hide the lingering effects of months spent living rough, but his voice carried the authority of someone who had witnessed truth firsthand, his testimony compelling even the most skeptical jurors to lean forward and listen as he explained how he had taught himself to track inventory shipments and cross-reference them with the restaurant's public menu prices, his remarkable intelligence shining through despite his lack of formal education. Chen, who had built his empire on gut instincts, recognized the raw truth in the boy's wide eyes, and instead of calling security, he took Tommy to his penthouse office, where private investigators unveiled security footage showing kitchen staff dragging garbage bags full of expired caviar and spoiled Wagyu beef back through the kitchen doors at midnight, while the owner laughed and counted thick stacks of cash. The tech billionaire had made his fortune by spotting patterns others missed, and that December morning something in Tommy's desperate warning had triggered the same instinct that had led him to invest in groundbreaking startups years before, his mind already racing with possibilities as he guided the shivering boy through the gleaming lobby of Chen Tower, while curious employees stared at the unlikely pair. In the courtroom, Chen described how he had immediately called Angela Martinez, his head of corporate security, a former FBI agent who had transitioned to private sector work, bringing with her a network of skilled investigators who could move discreetly in the shadowy world between wealth and poverty. Their expertise, typically used for protecting tech secrets, now turned toward unraveling a different kind of conspiracy. The penthouse office had intimidated Tommy. At first, its floor to ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city that had been both his home and his hell for the past 6 months. But Chen had watched in amazement as the boy had pushed aside his awe to spread out his tattered notebook on a conference table, worth more than most cars, his small dirty fingers pointing out delivery schedules and petrol patterns with the precision of a seasoned detective. Martinez's team had moved with surgical precision in the following weeks, installing microscopic cameras in delivery areas, setting up surveillance posts in neighboring buildings, and placing undercover operatives as kitchen staff. They gathered evidence, corroborating every detail in Tommy's journal, while uncovering an operation far more extensive than anyone had imagined. The courtroom screens displayed a timeline of the investigation, showing how Chen had devoted millions of dollars and countless resources to building an airtight case, his tech expertise allowing him to create sophisticated tracking systems that followed ingredients from expired source to fraudulent sale, while his financial analysts traced money laundering schemes that stretched across multiple shell companies. Tommy had proved invaluable during the investigation, his intimate knowledge of the restaurant's routines, helping Martinez's team avoid detection, while his understanding of the homeless community's patterns revealed how the restaurant owners had specifically timed their waste disposal to target those most desperate for food, knowing that any illness would be attributed to the general conditions of street life. Chen testified about the night they had caught the smoking gun footage, his voice tight with controlled anger, as he described watching through high-definition surveillance feeds as restaurant staff methodically repackaged expired ingredients. His personal assistant had to stop him from storming the restaurant himself when they witnessed workers washing moldy bread with bleach solution. The courtroom gasped as evidence photos flashed across screens, showing industrial freezers packed with relabeled meat and fish dated years past expiration, while Tommy testified about the nights he had spent sick and shivering after eating discarded food, his small voice growing stronger as he described other homeless people who had disappeared after eating at the dumpsters. District Attorney Sarah Martinez stood beside the evidence display, her laser pointer highlighting timestamps on surveillance photos that showed restaurant workers methodically scraping mold off cheese blocks and repackaging them with new expiration dates, the images growing increasingly disturbing as they revealed entire underground storage rooms filled with expired luxury ingredients worth millions of dollars in retail sales. Tommy sat straight backed in the witness chair, his new clothes a stark contrast to the images of himself captured on security cameras months ago, when he had been nothing more than a shadow moving through back alleys, his testimony painting a vivid picture of survival on the streets, where the choice between starving and risking food poisoning was a daily reality. The evidence presentation continued with forensic accountants explaining elaborate spreadsheets that tracked the restaurant's true food costs against their reported expenses, revealing a profit margin so impossibly high it had somehow escaped scrutiny for years, while health department officials squirmed in their seats as their oversight failures were laid bare through years of falsified inspection reports. In the gallery, several former restaurant employees who had turned state's evidence watched with tears streaming down their faces as Tommy described watching them through kitchen windows, their guilty expressions now matching their internal struggles, as he recounted how some had tried to warn homeless individuals away from certain garbage bags, marking them with subtle X symbols to indicate dangerous contents. The most damning evidence came from Tommy's own medical records, obtained from free clinics and emergency rooms, documenting numerous cases of severe food poisoning, that coincided perfectly with his journal entries about contaminated food, the dates matching perfectly with the restaurant's documented practice of disposing expired luxury ingredients through their waste system. Chen watched from his seat beside his lawyers as Tommy described the night he had witnessed two restaurant workers dragging an unconscious homeless man away from the dumpster area, the boy's voice trembling as he recounted how that man had never been seen again, his testimony causing several jurors to cover their mouths in horror, while the defense team scrambled to object to the emotional impact of his words. The prosecution methodically connected Tommy's observations to hard evidence, presenting thermal imaging scans of the restaurant's hidden storage areas, showing how they had constructed false walls within walk-in freezers to hide their expired inventory, while time-stamped delivery records proved their systematic purchase of near-expired luxury ingredients at deep discounts. Security footage from multiple angles showed the carefully choreographed dance of deception as fresh ingredients were displayed prominently during health inspections, while workers quietly accessed hidden storage areas through carefully concealed panels, their movements revealing a level of organization that proved the fraud was no mere oversight but a carefully planned criminal enterprise. Tommy's voice grew stronger as he described how he had learned to recognize the signs of food tampering, his street education in food safety, coming at the cost of countless nights spent violently ill, his detailed descriptions of symptoms matching perfectly with CDC reports about foodborne illness outbreaks that had previously gone unexplained in the city's homeless population. The court fell silent as Martinez played audio recordings captured by Chen's investigation team, revealing restaurant management laughing about their wealthy clients who paid premium prices for garbage while discussing which homeless individuals might cause them trouble if they survived their encounters with the tainted food, the callousness of their conversations drawing audible gasps from the jury. Through it all, Tommy maintained his composure, his clear eyes meeting those of the defendants as he delivered testimony that would destroy their empire, his small frame containing a strength that seemed to grow with each truth he revealed. Bai Chen watched with a mixture of pride and pain as the boy he had come to care for relived the trauma of his experiences in service of justice. Defense attorneys circled Tommy like sharks, attempting to tear apart his story, but the boy who had taught himself to read using discarded newspapers stood his ground, revealing a photographic memory that recalled every detail down to the serial numbers on falsified health inspection documents, leaving the city's top lawyer stuttering in disbelief. Richard Sterling, the lead defense attorney, known for breaking witnesses with his aggressive cross-examination style, approached Tommy with a predatory confidence that quickly dissolved as the boy matched him fact for fact, his knowledge of the restaurant's operations proving unshakable, while Sterling grew increasingly frustrated by his inability to find a single inconsistency in the boy's testimony. The defense team had prepared a slideshow attempting to discredit Tommy by showing his lack of formal education, but their strategy backfired spectacularly as the boy demonstrated how he had used food industry magazines found in recycling bins to learn about proper storage temperatures and safe handling procedures, his self-taught expertise revealing a remarkable intelligence that had gone unrecognized during his time on the streets. Tommy recited exact dates, times, and locations without hesitation when Sterling tried to trap him with trick questions about timeline inconsistencies, the boy calmly explaining how he had used the restaurant staff's cigarette breaks to track time patterns, his observations so precise that even the defendants shifted uncomfortably in their seats as their own routines were laid bare before the court. The courtroom watched in amazement as Tommy sketched the restaurant's floor plan from memory on a digital display, his small hand steady as he marked delivery entrance points, ventilation shafts, and hidden storage areas, his drawing matching architectural plans down to the centimeter while explaining how each space played a role in the criminal operation, his street-level view providing insights that even professional investigators had missed. Sterling attempted to suggest that Tommy had been coached by Chen and his legal team, but the boy responded by pulling out his original notebook and reading entries dated months before he had met the billionaire, the crude drawings and misspelled words, offering authentic proof of his independent investigation while providing a poignant reminder of his circumstances during the documentation process. The defense lawyer's next strategy involved bringing in psychology experts to question Tommy's mental state, suggesting that hunger and desperation had caused him to imagine conspiracies, but the boy calmly produced dated phone photos he had taken using a discarded smartphone he had found, showing clear evidence of food tampering, his resourcefulness in charging the device at public libraries, demonstrating both his determination and ingenuity. As the cross-examination stretched into its third hour, Tommy remained composed even as Sterling grew increasingly aggressive, his small voice never wavering as he corrected the lawyer's misstatements about restaurant operations, explaining complex food safety violations with the expertise of a health inspector, while members of the jury nodded in appreciation of his clear and factual responses. The defense team attempted to paint Tommy as an opportunist seeking attention and rewards, but their arguments fell apart as the boy described refusing initial offers of help from Chen, insisting instead that they focus on gathering evidence to protect others from food poisoning, his selfless dedication to exposing the truth shining through every answer, while Sterling visibly struggled to maintain his prosecutorial demeanor. Throughout the grueling questioning, Tommy demonstrated an extraordinary ability to separate facts from emotions, explaining the technical details of the restaurant's fraudulent practices without being drawn into the defense team's attempts to provoke an emotional response, his composure standing in sharp contrast to Sterling's increasingly frustrated attempts to undermine his credibility. The gallery watched with growing admiration as Tommy used his street-learned skills of observation to counter each of Sterling's challenges, anticipating questions before they were fully asked and providing detailed context that left no room for misinterpretation, his testimony becoming a masterclass in truth-telling that had veteran courthouse observers shaking their heads in amazement. The scandal exploded beyond the courtroom as investigators uncovered a network of 30 luxury restaurants, all owned by the same shadow corporation that had been serving tainted food to the city's elite, while their garbage had poisoned the homeless population for years, leading to hundreds of unreported deaths and thousands of hospitalizations. FBI Special Agent Marcus Rodriguez took the stand, revealing how Chen's investigation had helped uncover an international smuggling operation that supplied expired luxury ingredients to high-end restaurants across the country, his testimony accompanied by surveillance photos showing underground warehouses filled with counterfeit caviar, expired Wagyu beef, and relabeled truffles that had been deemed unsafe for consumption in their countries of origin. The prosecution presented evidence from hospital records spanning the past 5 years, showing clusters of severe food poisoning cases that perfectly aligned with the locations of the restaurant group's properties, while medical examiners testified about suspicious deaths among the homeless population that had previously been dismissed as natural causes but now painted a picture of systematic negligence and criminal disregard for human life. Tommy watched from the gallery as public health officials reviewed how the restaurant group had manipulated food safety inspection schedules using a complex computer algorithm to predict inspection dates and temporarily replace expired ingredients with fresh ones, their deception so sophisticated that it had food health departments in 12 different cities by putting countless lives at risk. The courtroom screens displayed a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts used to purchase expired luxury ingredients at massive discounts, forensic accountants explaining how the restaurant group had generated over $100 million in profit by serving dangerous food to both their wealthy clients and inadvertently to the homeless population who scavenged their waste. Former employees from across the restaurant empire came forward with devastating testimony describing how they had been threatened with deportation or financial ruin if they spoke out about the food safety violations, their stories corroborating Tommy's observations while revealing how the corruption had spread through every level of the organization from dishwashers to executive chefs. The scandal reached into City Hall as evidence emerged showing health department officials accepting bribes to overlook violations, while police reports revealed a pattern of harassment against homeless individuals who had attempted to report food safety concerns. Their complaints systematically buried or dismissed, creating a perfect shield for the criminal enterprise to operate behind. Social workers testified about the devastating impact on the homeless community, describing how the restaurants had specifically timed their disposal of tainted food to coincide with when homeless individuals were most desperate, their actions showing a calculated understanding of how to exploit the city's most vulnerable population while maintaining plausible deniability. The prosecution presented DNA evidence collected from various restaurant dumpsters, linking specific batches of contaminated food to hospitalizations and deaths throughout the city, while surveillance footage showed restaurant staff deliberately placing tainted food in accessible locations, knowing it would be consumed by hungry individuals seeking sustenance. Tech experts explained how the restaurant group's computer systems had been programmed to automatically generate false documentation for expired ingredients, creating perfect paper trails that had food auditors and health inspectors, while the true records were encrypted and stored on overseas servers that had only been discovered through Chen's cybersecurity team. The scope of the conspiracy continued to grow as investigators revealed connections to other luxury food suppliers who had been complicit in the scheme, providing falsified certification papers for expired ingredients while helping to launder money through a complex network of international transactions, their participation ensuring a steady supply of dangerous products. Tommy sat quietly beside Chen as the full impact of his simple act of warning a stranger about a sandwich rippled through the courtroom. His small notebook, now at the center of a case that had exposed not just food safety violations, but a criminal empire built on exploiting both the wealthy's desire for luxury and the desperation of those struggling to survive on the streets. Chen shocked the city by announcing live from the courthouse steps that he was converting his next billion-dollar tech campus project into a revolutionary homeless shelter and culinary training institute, while Tommy, standing beside him in a custom suit, revealed his plan to become a health inspector, his eyes gleaming with fierce determination. The announcement sent ripples through the business community as Chen unveiled architectural plans showing how the half-constructed tech campus would be transformed into a state-of-the-art facility, combining emergency housing with long-term transitional apartments, while the planned data centers would become teaching kitchens where homeless individuals could learn culinary skills and food safety protocols from world-renowned chefs who had volunteered their services. Tommy had worked alongside Chen's architects for weeks, helping design spaces that would truly serve the homeless community, his first-hand experience of life on the streets informing every aspect of the facility from secure storage lockers to charging stations for phones, while his understanding of food safety helped create protocols that would ensure the highest standards of cleanliness and proper food handling. The media crowded around as Chen explained how the facility would partner with local restaurants to provide job training and placement services, his tone firm as he announced that any establishment wishing to work with his companies would need to maintain transparency in their food handling practices while providing employment opportunities to graduates of the culinary program. Sarah Chen, Marcus' wife, stepped forward to announce her own initiative to create a foundation dedicated to investigating food safety violations and supporting whistleblowers, her eyes filling with tears as she described how meeting Tommy had opened their eyes to the invisible struggles of those living on the streets while teaching them the true meaning of courage and persistence. The courthouse steps became a symbol of transformation as former restaurant workers who had testified in the trial were offered positions as instructors in the new facility. Their knowledge of the industry now turned toward teaching others, while their insider understanding of how corners get cut would help prevent future violations. Tommy spoke with quiet confidence about his plans to create a special division of youth health inspectors, explaining how young people often notice details adults miss, while their presence in kitchens would remind food workers of their responsibility to maintain safety standards, his innovative approach drawing support from city officials who had been humbled by their previous failures. Chen detailed how artificial intelligence systems, originally designed for his tech companies, would be repurposed to track food safety compliance across the city, creating an early warning system for potential violations while ensuring that no restaurant could hide behind falsified documentation or manipulated inspection schedules. The announcement included plans for a scholarship program named in Tommy's honor that would support homeless youth who wished to pursue careers in food safety, public health, or social services, the first recipient being a young girl who had helped Tommy document the restaurant's violations during his months of investigation. Business leaders watched in amazement as Chen systematically laid out how corporate responsibility could align with profitability, his own transformation from tech billionaire to social advocate, inspiring others to reconsider their approach to community engagement, while his financial commitment to the project proved that wealth could be a tool for genuine change. Tommy demonstrated the facility's planned safety features using a digital model, his small hands moving confidently across the display as he showed how technology and human oversight would work together to prevent future food safety violations, his personal experience with hunger and illness having shaped every aspect of the security protocols. The gathered crowd fell silent as Chen described how each resident of the facility would have access to nutrition education, cooking classes, and job training, his voice growing passionate as he explained how breaking the cycle of poverty required more than just providing meals, it demanded creating opportunities for people to rebuild their lives with dignity and purpose. Local government officials stepped forward to announce changes in food safety regulations inspired by Thomas' testimony, the commitment to reform drawing applause from the crowd. While Chen pledged his resources to help implement the new standards, ensuring that profit would never again take precedence over public health. Justice arrived not just in guilty verdicts, but in the transformation of a city as Chen and Tommy partnered to create safe food programs for the homeless community, while this story inspired a nationwide movement of restaurant reform, leaving Tommy to reflect that sometimes the smallest voice speaking truth to power could echo far beyond the marble walls of a single courtroom. 1 year after the trial, Tommy stood at a podium in the grand opening ceremony of the Hope Rising Center, the transformed tech campus, now a beacon of light for the city's homeless population, its gleaming walls housing not just beds and kitchens but dreams and second chances. While Chen watched proudly from the audience as his young friend delivered a speech that brought tears to hundreds of eyes. The center's first graduating class of culinary students, many of whom had once eaten from the same dumpsters, as Tommy prepared a gourmet feast for the celebration, their newly earned certificates and chef whites representing not just professional achievement but personal transformation, while local restaurant owners lined up to offer them positions in establishments now famous for their commitment to food safety and social responsibility. Chen had kept his promise to revolutionize the city's approach to homelessness and food safety, the Hope Rising Center becoming a model studied by urban planners and social workers from around the world, while Tommy continued to develop innovative programs that bridged the gap between wealth and poverty, his unique perspective reshaping how society viewed both food safety and human dignity. The former restaurant empire had been transformed into a network of community kitchens where wealthy patrons dined alongside those in need to pay what you can model, proving surprisingly profitable while creating spaces where people from all walks of life shared meals and stories, breaking down barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. Tommy, now 14, had grown taller, but his eyes retained their fierce determination as he led tours through the center's teaching kitchens, where former homeless individuals learned alongside culinary students from prestigious cooking schools, his program fostering understanding and collaboration between groups that had once been worlds apart. The city health department had undergone its own transformation, with Tommy serving as the youngest ever youth advisor, his experience inspiring a new generation of inspectors who approached their work not just as enforcement but as an opportunity to educate and uplift, by Chen's technology ensured transparency and accountability throughout the food service industry. Sarah Chen had expanded her foundation's work to cities across the country, creating a network of support for homeless youth, while funding research into innovative solutions for food security and safety. Her partnership with Tommy, showing how privilege and street wisdom could combine to create lasting change. The courthouse where the trial had taken place now housed a permanent exhibition featuring Tommy's tattered notebook alongside photographs documenting the center's impact. Its marble halls no longer echoing with arguments about guilt, but instead hosting discussions about community healing and social justice. Chen had discovered that his greatest innovation wasn't in technology, but in recognizing the potential in a desperate boys, warning his billions, now funding similar centers in cities around the world, while Tommy's story became required reading in business schools, teaching future leaders about true corporate responsibility and the power of listening to unexpected voices. The restaurant industry nationwide had embraced new standards of transparency and accountability, inspired by the case with Tommy and Chen, consulting on food safety protocols that protected both customers and communities while ensuring that profit and ethics could coexist in harmony. Local schools had incorporated the center's culinary program into their curriculum, sending students to learn about food safety and social responsibility from those who had experienced hunger firsthand, while Tommy worked to ensure that no other child would have to learn these lessons on the streets. As evening fell on the celebration, Tommy and Chen stood together watching the sunset from the center's rooftop garden, where vegetables grew for both the kitchen and the community. Their unlikely friendship having sparked a movement that proved how justice could nourish both body and soul, while their story continued to inspire others to speak truth to power regardless of their circumstances.